Well, good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you're located, what time zone you're in. My name is Paul Armstrong. I will be your speaker today, your host through the second part of the 2021 International Residential Code Significant Changes. As we know, if you attended our last session, part one, we are going to be going through these significant changes fairly quickly. I am going to try and certainly do my best in the time that we have to identify certainly the changes at the not the very least, but also their background and I think the impacts. So we're going to talk about the description right now of the course. We've kind of gone through that a bit. You can see that we are talking about the 2021 International Residential Code. We are, just so you know, the International Code Council is in the throes, really, of publishing the 2024 edition. We don't know exactly what it looks like. We have an idea based on what we know are the code changes that were approved ultimately by the ICC membership and ratified by their board of directors. But we don't really know exactly what it looks like yet. But just keep a weather eye out for the 2024 edition of the significant changes for both the International Residential Code and the International Building Code in the future. Here are our objectives today. They're exactly the same as part one. We're going to identify the differences between the two codes. I'm going to try and go through some of the concepts, summarize the application, and I hope really identify impacts to those of us in the design, enforcement, and perhaps even the construction side. If any builders are attending, that would be a great thing. And certainly the enforcement issues we're going to identify, although a lot of those were already in part one of this particular presentation. Now, one thing about the splitting of these presentations is we actually did talk about ESS, our energy storage systems, things related to electricity, so to speak, and all of that. We're continuing on with that. This happens, to me at least, to be one of the most interesting code changes I've ever seen in the residential code. And as I mentioned in part one, I was the original drafting secretariat. I got to work with all of the committee members and the membership and all of that in the development of the 2000 edition. And this particular item kind of steps outside, certainly, of the scope, to me at least, the scope of the International Residential Code. We are talking about using electric vehicles to power dwellings, certainly in the event of an emergency. I wouldn't believe that it would be on a regular basis. But if there's a power outage or something happens to the grid, to the supply that comes into the dwellings, that we can actually hook up our electric vehicles and actually run our homes for a period of time. I have talked with people about how long that is. Like I said, this is very interesting to me to see this in the International Residential Code. But people have said anywhere, well, they mostly fall on about 3 days, depending on certainly the load that the dwelling has. Could be more, could be less. Again, depending on the drawdown that each dwelling has, depending on all the appliances and everything that uses electricity. Very interesting to see this. Like with any sort of appliance or piece of equipment, we have to make sure that we are complying with the manufacturer's installation instructions and, of course, the electrical code, NFPA 70. The industry has done a lot of work, as we mentioned in the last webinar, on including energy storage systems and other sorts of criteria in the residential code and in other codes now. And we have that available for us to use. And people can now, based on this particular code, use their electric vehicles in a different way to actually power their refrigerators and whatever else that they have in their home that runs on electricity. Very interesting to see this. Continuing on with our energy storage system, this is kind of a funny one to me. We've had more of this occurring through the codes where we actually have to have a copy of the manufacturer's installation and operation and maintenance criteria. But not only that, but how we can decommission these systems provided to the owner. And then it does say, or placed in a conspicuous location close to the energy storage system. That's actually the wording out of the code. We don't know what that means. Conspicuous location means different things to different people. So we're going to have to see these types of documents hopefully get into the hands of the people that are going to be using these systems and hopefully maintaining them moving out. The other thing that this particular code section does is it also requires a label on the energy storage system itself of contact information for qualified maintenance and service providers. Could be singular, even provider. It doesn't say who that is, doesn't say what qualifies them to work on these particular system. It just says that they have to be qualified. Now, for me, and hopefully we get this, the people who install the energy storage system and whatever else that goes along with the particular project that's going on in the home or the duplex or the townhome, hopefully those particular firms are qualified to do maintenance and service on these systems too. And so presumably we would get just the label of whatever company has done the installation. Otherwise, we're going to have a list from the enforcement side of who is qualified and maybe identifying by not being on the list who is not qualified. And that's an awkward position to put certainly the building inspectors, building officials, and those folks that are doing the inspections out there. It's a very awkward position to put them in. So take a look at this, make sure that we are getting these instructions in at least the hands of the owner or on a shelf, very close by, that kind of a thing. As I said, there's other criteria in the code or codes that are enforced by jurisdictions that are also calling out the give me just a second there, Marcy. Calling out the actual presence of these instructions and all of that to help with the maintenance of these systems moving forward. Okay, we've made a big jump. We are now moving into really more of the construction of the dwellings themselves that are covered by the International Residential Code. There are a lot of changes here. The industry groups that are representing the construction materials are constantly doing research on the performance of their materials and the performance of the criteria in the code for the built environment. And so we're getting that coming out. We get a lot of clarifications because like the American Wood Council, all the other construction material groups get questions as to the application of the code to their projects based on conditions of these projects themselves. And so we have, as we're going to go through the rest of today, most of what we're going to be talking about are clarifications. This actually is not, per se. We're actually eliminating the use of two different types of really fabrics or plastic material from the waterproofing criteria for foundations. So 6 mil polyvinyl chloride, PVC, or 6 mil polyethylene fabric have been removed. They have been found to not perform in the way that certainly we expect them to perform by being referenced in the code. And so they're no longer as part of the acceptable list of the various types of materials that can be used for waterproofing. Here is another very interesting code change, and as I said in the first part, I find all code changes interesting, so bear with me. I'm sorry if I use that term an awful lot. This one is one that's going to be a challenge, I think, certainly for our contractors out there, and I hope they know about this. But the 10 mil or 10 mil vapor retarder underneath concrete slabs is now the requirement. Previously, it was 6 mil. So we're actually increasing the thickness. We get that, and we have the standard lapping of the joints and all of that. But there could be contractors out there that have a stockpile, probably not a ton, but I'm sure they have quite a bit of 6 mil types of fabrics that would be placed under vapor retarders. So what can they do with that particular product? 10 mil is the minimum. Well, in talking with people and certainly going through the code development process, what was found is that they can double up, obviously, on the 6 mil. We asked if there were 2 layers of 6 mil that could be used and would actually get the performance underneath our slabs that we're looking for, and the answer was yes. And so, you know, when you go out there, inspectors in the field, and someone is using a 6 mil vapor retarder, you can just say, you know, the code has changed. All you need to do, though, is double up on the 6 mil and you're in good shape. Unfortunately, if the contractor has not paid attention to this particular item, and it's not something that really jumps out in the residential code, they may be surprised by this particular code change. And so you might have to work with them a little bit, and they may actually have to go and get another amount of this 6 mil vapor retarder to place underneath there to finish out the project. It's an unfortunate aspect, and I don't know that there's a lot of training going on, certainly for those that are out in the field actually conducting the construction, certainly for concrete slabs that we're looking for here. Deck loads. You can see that there have been, you will see that there are a lot of code changes related to changing the criteria for the construction of decks. The prescriptive criteria in the codes has been around for some time. We started to specify deck construction not too long ago, and we've had to change certainly some of the loading criteria, some of the other criteria that we apply to the construction of decks, because this is one of the most popular types of projects that are out there, certainly for homeowners to do on weekends with friends, what have you, is to construct a nice new deck serving their dwelling. Well, we have new loading criteria that we have to deal with, and the design of the criteria, it's not just the footings, this particular slide applies to footings, but the design of other criteria is based on a 40-pound live load or 50, 60, or 70-pound ground snow load. Well, that's great, and we have lots of tables, lots of prescriptive criteria to take a look at in this regard. However, we do know that some jurisdictions have increased the load, the live load, for decks and balconies based on a perceived lack of performance of those particular elements. Balconies in particular have had some challenges over the last decade, really, with collapsing based on increased loads and things of that nature. Here in the state of California, I'm based in California, we actually have an amendment to the loading criteria that increases our live load for decks and balconies to 60 pounds per square foot. Well, it makes it kind of difficult to use this criteria. It doesn't translate directly over to 60-pound ground snow load well, but 70-pound ground snow load values should work. Take a look at this criteria. Please keep a weather eye out for other code changes to address that, especially if your local jurisdiction uses or has amended the code to increase the deck and balcony live loads. You're going to have to take a look at this and maybe make some amendments to this moving on so people can use this criteria. Deck posts, you know, we were looking at the footings, we're moving up in the construction, we're at the deck post now. The table for deck posts has been added, very nice to have in the code We have almost, I think, a complete set of prescriptive criteria for the construction of decks now. Very, very handy. Okay. It is based on the loads that we just talked about, so we're going to have to take a look at that too, although the posts, for the most part, shouldn't have that much trouble, but we're going to have to evaluate that as well moving on into the future. Deck beams, you can see we have the 40-pound live load and the same snow loads here for the beams and whatnot. As we have in the residential code, the beam tables themselves are set up so that we actually use single or multi-ply 2x beams, if you will, or 2x elements to create the beams and also the cantilevering of the joists themselves. And so we have all of that in the table. It makes it very easy. It actually reduces the cost a bit, certainly, if you only have to use a number of 2x10s as opposed to getting 4xs or what have you for some of the longer spans. We've got all of that in the table. It's very, very convenient to use for the prescriptive construction of decks. One thing I forgot to mention, certainly for the jurisdictions out there, is if you have a handout or if you want to have a handout for the construction of decks, you should really take a look at this particular section, section R507, and either amend what you have now or build it into a handout. There's a lot of jurisdictions out there that have handouts for deck construction. So there's really not that much that's new under the sun. You can reach out, talk to them, obviously, about maybe getting a copy for yourself. And then you can put certainly your jurisdiction's logo, letterhead, things of that nature on there and make it your own and put it on the web, your web page for people to use moving out in the future. Very, very handy to have that. There's some jurisdictions, like I said, that go to a lot of effort to create all kinds of handouts for people to use. Deck joists, okay, we have more options now. We've got the ability to have greater cantilevers over the beams. A lot of work has gone on with this. There is an organization that represents groups or contractors that build decks, balconies too, presumably, but decks more specifically. And they've been very involved and done a tremendous amount of work on this particular criteria. And it makes it very easy, again, for people to use. And then the decking, okay? The decking table has been updated. We've got a nice set of criteria. I think it's a little more clear to use now. We have single and multi-span configurations, and then we can also use diagonal decking. Not everybody wants to have their decking perpendicular to the joists that they have built into place. And so we can actually have a diagonal pattern built into these decks now. Again, they're adding more and more to make this decking criteria much more usable for people building decks, certainly for the homeowners, I think, and for those framers out there that are building decks prescriptively. Here is one of the tables in particular, some criteria related to the maximum joist spacing. This is specific to the decking material. You can see that we have 1 1/4 inch wood and we have 2 inch wood as the decking material that can be used. And then you go on there, depending on the application of the decking itself, you can actually, create, obviously, the actual structure of the decks that you're building. And then I think this might be the last slide on decks, section R507.10. We even have a section for our guards. I used to say guardrails, but it's more than that now. And this particular section has been included to provide criteria for not just wood, but for our plastic, composite, and other types of guard material that are used out there. I try not to use manufacturers' names when there are other manufacturers out there for products, but you know who they are. We're starting to see people use those more and more for deck construction because they hold up pretty well out there in the exterior environment. Okay, we've moved out of chapter 5, and we have basically 10 chapters that we're going to talk about. today, plus a few appendix chapters. So we're moving along, and we're doing actually very well, I think, certainly for our particular webinar here. As I mentioned before, industry groups have been just constantly evaluating the performance of all sorts of criteria in the codes based on their particular product. This is for wood construction, obviously, and I'm with American Wood Council, so we're very interested in this, and our people have done a really good amount of work bringing in the additional types of connections or fasteners, if you will, that can be used for roof and wall construction. We get these particular elements identified to us by questions, emails, texts, people call us, what have you. And they ask about different types of fastening situations. They ask about all sorts of things. And we actually do, so you know, keep track of that and then try to adjust the code to accommodate those particular questions or concerns when they come in on a regular basis. We can't do all of them because there's a lot of questions that come up, but we try to get as many as we can to really help certainly the industry deal with the construction that's in front of them. And so we've built in all kinds of fasteners. We're constantly looking at our fastening schedule, or nailing schedule, used to call it, and the like, and just try to provide prescriptively, again, criteria that can be used very easily out in the field. This does not kind of push aside any sort of engineering analysis. Okay, you can have an architect in some areas do engineering. Obviously, engineers, licensed engineers can do that too, and they will have, certainly the NDS, they'll have all kinds of criteria available to them to be able to address certainly the construction of whatever type of assembly they're looking at. Okay, but this is the prescriptive criteria that we have in the residential code that can be used by anybody really who has at least a good familiarity with the construction process itself. Here we are. Okay, you can see here's some of the changes and all of that. We've actually built in, certainly in this case, our 3/8 1/2-inch wood structural panel type of fastening situation with, in this case, nails or ring shank nails, things of that nature, and we can just have more flexibility in the types of fastening types of connections that we need to create wood structures. Here we have another one, item 12 in the table itself, adjacent full height stud to the end of the header. You can see this is a box header, a built up header, that kind of a thing. And we have prescriptive criteria in this particular slide that is found in the code. Unfortunately, some of the formatting of this slide got a little bit funky under the nail section, but each of those items are the fastening, if you will, condition that can be used for this particular situation that we have in front of us, the full height stud to the header. Okay, so you can use 4 6-penny box nails. You can use 3 16-penny. I think I said, hopefully I said 16-penny for the box nails. Common nails too. You could use 4 10-penny box nails or 4 3-inch, basically, you can see the diameter of the nails themselves. And so we have all of that listed there just in case you have those much more available than other types of nails. And you can see the location is called out in the spacing criteria, spacing location criteria. It's an end nail kind of configuration. Alternate fasteners. This has been kind of an interesting one. I always find it interesting to have alternates in the code. We have the ability to evaluate alternates in pretty much all codes that are out there. In this case, we have a different kind of a fastener application, and the code has been, it says updated, but really it's been clarified to specify this to roof sheathing only. Okay, you can see the wind speed criteria. It applies to wind speeds of less than or equal to 110 miles an hour. And it talks about the spacing of the fasteners there at the bottom. But we have this in footnotes. This really brings up an interesting point. If you're planning on or you're about to take any sort of certification exam, through ICC, whether it's based on the residential code or the building code or what have you, always, always, always be familiar with the footnotes. These certification exam members, they meet and they like to make you think a little bit. Okay, they want to make sure that you know what's going on. And so they frequently will use a footnote, if there's another type of book, maybe a caption or whatever, as part of the answer to the certification question that's in front of you. Okay, so always, always, always study, at least read through the footnotes, be familiar with what they are so you're not tripped up on any particular exam question. Triple walls, again, in that second line, you can see there's that C word, clarified. The criteria applies only to exterior cripple walls. Interior cripple walls, you know, we have some criteria for that. We don't have to worry nearly as much on the interior application, because in most cases, the exterior walls are load-bearing walls, right? And this applies to continuously sheathed walls that are less than 14 inches tall. They're cripple walls, basically, that are less than 14 inches tall. Okay. Brace wall lines. We've moved in really to our lateral force resisting system for wood frame construction. This criteria has caused certainly the plans that are developed for the prescriptive construction of residential buildings that are scoped under the IRC to become much more detailed, so that we can understand certainly that they do comply with the code, right? The code has been, I think it's been clarified, because in the development of it, the idea, at least the simple idea, is that you would have on a given brace wall line, half of the brace wall, the required brace wall panel length on one end of the brace wall line and the other half on an opposite end. Okay, well, the code wasn't that clear on that, and so people even combine them into one area. Now we have a limitation that says no more than 2/3 of the required brace wall panel length can occur on one end, really, of the brace wall line versus the other. So you can have, obviously, if you just follow the simple math, 2/3 on one end and 1/3 on the other. I still like the 50-50 rule myself. It's simple. It's very redundant. It really makes for I think, a solid building myself. The 2/3 and 1/3 works too. I get it. I'm an engineer. 50-50 is a lot easier to understand. We still have the ability to offset brace wall panels within a brace wall line by up to 4 feet. We get that. That hasn't changed. We're just starting to see much more detail required in these framing plans, in particular for these prescriptively designed residential buildings. Very, very interesting to see the continual growth of this criteria. And really, from what we can tell, it's a good performance too that we're seeing from these buildings that are designed and built, obviously, prescriptively. So it's very nice to see that. It's good to see that some of these clarifications, these additional limitations, are good rules of thumb. Now, the criteria is based on the required braced wall length. Okay, you can sheet the entire wall. You don't have to call it continuously sheeted, but people do that. They can sheet the entire wall and then you're good to go. Okay, you're not having to calculate which percentage is on which end. It's the whole thing. And if you do 2/3 and 2/3 or what have you, then you're in good shape with that too. Okay, it's what the code requires for the brace wall panel length is what the code is looking at here. Continuing on with that, and we're still within the lateral force resisting kinds of criteria. Okay, the use of seismic wall bracing. Obviously, we're in the higher seismic design categories with this. We have conditions that cause us to evaluate whether or not you can use prescriptive design for these residential buildings. One of the things that has been eliminated is the prescriptive limitation on the project being in Class D soil has been eliminated. Okay, they pull that out altogether as an enforcement, as a building official or building inspector, plan reviewer, what have you. We no longer have to ask for that. A lot of the people who, frankly, are designing these projects, they may not know what the soil classification is. And so they pulled it out and they made this criteria apply to all. Now we have 2 new footnotes that have been added. Certainly for our portal frame methods or our alternate brace wall methods, we have basically clarified again or provided a further limitation on the use of the 2 portal frame methods or the alternate brace wall method to a single story building or the first story of a 2-story building. Can't be used in 3 stories, right? And we have to be very careful about its location in a 2-story dwelling. Single story, no problem. And then we have this very interesting limitation in footnote H. In, frankly, one of the highest, pretty much just about the highest seismic design category D2, all 2-story dwellings that are scoped under the IRC, okay, if they exceed 2 stories, they have to be engineered. You cannot use the prescriptive criteria in that high seismic zone. That's old terminology, seismic design category. Okay, D2. It is the highest that we have in there. Obviously, we know there's a couple more that are provided. Those really get us into more engineered types of dwellings themselves too. This is something that is new. We used to be able to do upwards of 3-story prescriptively. We can't do that now. And certainly here in California, we have a lot of seismic design category areas that are identified as D2 here. And so we have to make sure that we're getting an engineer. Now, in those areas that have a big concern with earthquakes and seismic loads, we still see a lot of engineering that's done anyway, either by architects or engineers, just because they're familiar with it and people feel perhaps right, wrong, or indifferent, maybe a little more comfortable when there's an engineer involved. Okay, we get that, but know that in the IRC itself, the limit is in seismic design category D2 only. We don't have to worry about it in the others. To me, this is a funny one in chapter 6. I get that we have the criteria in there, but why we have garage doors in the wall framing chapter is always an interesting thing for me. But anyway, we have this criteria in the code. We get it. We now have, and this is new criteria, a requirement to have permanent labels on garage doors. You can see the picture here. It's looks like a nice roll down door, probably has some sort of garage door opener too. Very nice dwelling that it's part of. But that permanent label has to have a lot of information. Okay, so we have the wind pressure rating, and we understand why we need that. Wind plays havoc with these light doors. Okay. Along with that, we have to include the door manufacturer. Okay, we understand that. They're going to want it there. The door model and series. Okay, we're starting to get a little more specific information on this label. And then we need to have the installation instruction drawing reference number. The plan sheet or the drawing that is used by whoever's installing these garage doors, that number needs to be included on the label along with the applicable test standards that were applied to this door. That is a ton of information. Manufacturers, you know, the door manufacturers in particular, they're involved in the code development process. They know about this. The people who install the doors, maybe they know, and our inspection staff, well, hopefully you're finding out about it, or you knew about it already, or you're finding out about it now. Okay, in other words, when we get certainly a new dwelling, presumably in the picture it looks like a new dwelling, we're going to have to make sure that as inspection staff, that the label is there and it has all of the information that's provided. That's great. Does anybody get permits for, if you will, the replacement of existing garage doors? There are some out there that actually pull building permits to replace garage doors in existing dwellings. What I found is that mostly, no, it doesn't seem like they do. But we're going to have to make sure that whenever we're involved as an enforcement group, that the label is there and that the garage doors that are being used are properly identified. And obviously, if they have that information, you can verify the installation is appropriate too. Very, very interesting to have this. It does just kind of bring up the whole issue with replacing existing garage doors and how do we handle that. I've been a building official. I don't know, honestly, that I have ever seen a replacement garage door permit application cross my desk or the counter in the city that I was serving. Just get ready. You know, we may have some people coming in and applying for permits for those in the future. Okay, vapor retarders. Very interesting situation. There's been a ton of work out there just to make the criteria easier to use. You can see again, there's the clarification statement. I'm going to take a break and stop that. Okay, sorry, Marcy, I'm back. This criteria, along with some other criteria that we'll get to in a little bit, has really had a lot of industry attention to make it easier for us to use. And so the entire section has really been clarified. And when we get to the water resistant barriers itself, you'll see that it's really been clarified into just really very simple climate zones. And here it is. WRBs, water resistant barriers. There, like I said before, there's been just a ton of work on this. We have the criteria in both the residential and the building code. The industry itself, the home builders and others have been very interested in getting this much more easy to use. And we've really clarified the application of the criteria into two different climates. Now, they don't give a lot of information related to those climates, but those climates that are wet and those that are dry. I, again, live in California. We pretty much have dry climates. I consider pretty much the state as being a desert. The entire state is like being a desert compared to other states that we have here in the United States. They are much more subject to moisture-related problems than I will ever have here in Southern California, it seems. But we've gone through, and as a committee and as the ICC membership, and really made it much simpler to use. Okay, this applies to our building inspection staff, though, more than anything else, and obviously the people who install these types of barriers. Okay, during plan review, it's very simple to look at the plans and look for a table, and they pretty much copy the table out of the code, put it on the plan sheets, and you see wet and dry climates. We'll know one is, you know, if you're in a particular area that's dry, maybe here in California, we'll apply the dry climate criteria appropriately. And then now our inspection staff need to go out and make sure again that the framers and that the people that are installing these, the wraps and whatnot that go on these buildings understand the new criteria too. And just like with anything in this particular type of presentation, I'm talking to you about changes in the code. Then you all get to go out and you get to train other people that you interact with as well on these changes. Every 3 years, we have a new set of criteria. And our industry is really, as a result, more educational than many other industries that are out there. And so please, if you have any questions, feel free to, and I'll say this at the very end of today too, feel free to reach out and just ask myself, or certainly a lot of the industry people that are out there, or if you're a designer, a builder, what have you, feel free to talk with your building officials. Okay, they do have their own associations, their ICC chapter that they attend. You can actually attend those chapters and talk with them and understand certainly their particular positions too and what they have to do. It really is a good thing to have that kind of cross communication going on so we all understand each other. We've moved on into chapter 7. Chapter 7 is our exterior wall finishes. Basically, we're talking about veneers here. Been a bunch of work, clarifications really. We're now allowing larger air gaps because we have, based on our energy codes and other types of considerations, we have thicker continuous insulation that's being installed. And so the code has to adjust. There's new footnotes that have also been added that address more adjustable types of fasteners or attachments to the walls too. There's all kinds of changes seemingly every year that pop up in this industry, and all of this gets included in the code in one way or the other. And again, it makes it much more easy for us to build, much more easy for us to design and enforce the codes, but there's a lot more information to deal with. So know that the industry groups are out there to help you. Please reach out and ask them whatever question comes up. Vinyl siding. There is a Vinyl Siding Institute, and there's been a lot more research done, certainly on wind speed types of concerns related to the application of vinyl siding. In this case, some of the wind pressure ratings for vinyl siding have been reduced, actually. Okay. Now, it's the application of the criteria for the vinyl siding that changes then. Okay, we don't have engineering involved with this. It just says the reductions then apply to the vinyl siding, and then you have to use the appropriate fasteners, the appropriate type of application process, right? So we have that here now. Again, there's, like I'm saying constantly, there are industry groups that are very, very involved and are evaluating the performance of their particular products that they have control over, so that we, at dealing with these products out in the field, either design, construction, enforcement, what have you, can have the best criteria possible for the best quality of construction ultimately that we're looking for. Soffits, this is actually a very interesting criteria, and we have now an expansion of the materials that can be used for soffits. You can see in the picture here, some are very ornate. That's not my house, but I do have a boxed in eave, soffit, if you will, at that particular point. Mine happens to be wood structural panel, plywood. And we have more criteria related to the installation of these various types of soffits, again, coming from the industry groups that represent them. Now, we do know that certainly, and you need to be aware of, soffits are getting a little more attention outside of the residential code, but in the wildland fire types of areas, fire severity zones, you know, that kind of a thing. The soffitted areas are getting more research, and American Wood Council is doing research in the construction of soffits, their performance, and all of that. And we should have perhaps a better idea of the performance of soffits in at least testing environments that are going to be out there in those wildland fire areas. Obviously, wildland fire is a huge concern now for the United States, not just California. But given the wildland fire that occurred on Maui in particular, we're going to see, I'm sure, more evaluation research, if you will, done on the performance of buildings. Now, a lot of those buildings were very, very old structures. They did not conform to any sort of recent code per se necessarily. We just don't know. I mean, it still is so new that we need to take a look and let the people who are going to do the evaluation, the FEMA and the NIST and others, come up with the results of what occurred there. So just be aware that soffits are under a little bit of research and testing right now. And if you do have these wildland fire areas in your jurisdiction or in the areas that you are building or serving, that kind of a thing, that you really should take a look at the installation of these soffited types of products and make sure they comply, or they'll do at least a good job in resisting the penetration of fire. Chapter 8, we're getting there. Ridge design, we're in the wood framing criteria in section R802. Whenever you do not have continuous ties provided by ceiling joists or rafter ties, things of that nature, we do have a concern with the ridge board, the ridge of the roof itself. So either that ridge board has to be supported on a wall, or again, here we go, we're actually pushing that ridge back into an engineered solution. Okay, like we had with certainly the seismic wall bracing, we're starting to see more references in the residential code to engineered solutions. Okay, watch out for this. I just see this as really causing the installation or the framing of more rafter ties when you want to have certainly a more vaulted ceiling in whatever project you're working on residentially, that kind of a thing, or just the standard ceiling joist too, to have that continuous tie. I think it's going to encourage that more than anything else. So it's very interesting to see this. To me, again, the 2000 edition of the residential code had no engineering references built into it, other than saying the residential code was scoped to 1 and 2 family dwellings in townhomes that are 3 stories or less in height. Heel joint connections. We've expanded the heel joint connection table. Okay, we're including, the 2 roof spans that you see there, 24 feet and 36 feet. Now we understand that we need to have those in the code. Again, based on questions, based on concerns raised, we expanded the code. We put the code change in there and have gotten the ICC membership ultimately to agree. Also, a row for the rafter spacing of 19.2 inches has been included as well. So we're trying to, respond to the concerns that are raised again and provide that information in the building code itself. And here we are with footnote H. You can see that, again, there's the reference to the ceiling joists or rafter ties, providing that continuous tie. And then we've got the heel joint connections, increasing really in fastening types of requirements based on that. Rafter and ceiling joist bearing, it's amazing the amount of detail we're going into the code now, okay, from a framing standpoint. This section, as you can see here, really is stepping into the bearing of the rafters in a steep slope type of design, a roof design. Okay, we can now have prescriptively called out in the code, we have the bearing criteria for the rafters on certainly the plates that are supporting these rafters. When we have the continuous tie, again, the bearing criteria is met. You have the tie that provides that as well. But we have that in here. It's a very fine detail that has been built in. And it, again, responds to concerns that were addressed to us and to others on certainly this particular framing situation. Section 804, table 804.3, CFS is cold form steel. That particular industry also has been very actively evaluating their products, trying to respond to concerns, questions that are raised. You can see that there's a new item that is listed in this particular table for the gypsum wall board to cold form steel ceiling joists. Okay, and you can see that we've got certainly a fastening that is called out here. The number 6 screws at 12 inches on center as being an acceptable fastening arrangement for this particular configuration. Again, I'm saying it again, the industry has been very, very active in the code development process. Chapter 9, metal roof shingles. Okay. As with any roofing product, while there are all kinds of loads that are imposed, certainly on exterior elements in particular, wind is a particular problem for roof shingles. Okay, there has been now a table that has been added for metal roof shingles, and the table talks about the application of certainly the metal roof shingles to various roof configurations. Okay. Again, there is a roof contractors association, the National Roof Contractors Association, that is very involved in the development of, certainly the research and evaluation of their particular roofing products. And so that's what they've done here. Okay, we've moved on along, and we are in our reference standards that have been added. These are our wood standards that we have brought in. Just so you know, every 3 years, there are a lot of new standards and certainly a ton of revised standards that are referred to in all the codes. For those that enforce the code, you better take a look at your state enabling legislation for adopting and enforcing codes, because some of them say that you need to have these codes available or at least accessible in some manner. Okay. For people who have questions related to whatever is covered by the codes. You can see that we have these codes here. You can see that the first one is our span tables. We have the 2021 edition for our joist and rafter span tables referred to now. So you know, again, industry has a lot of standards that they are the secretariat for, and they are constantly having their committees go through and evaluate the performance of those standards. There are also new technologies, new issues that come up that need to be built into these standards, as we have with the codes as well. So that is what the American Wood Council has done with pretty much all or most of these. I mean, there's some plywood here that's handled by the American Plywood Association, the Engineered Wood Association. But we have the permanent wood foundation design specification that has been updated. You can see that's the 2021 edition. We have American Wood Preservers Association. Sorry, I just stumbled there for a second. They have a new standard. It's the 2020 edition for the use of their products in the treatment of wood. Okay, we have the product standards for plywood and certainly for wood structural panels too. Those have also been updated. We have a lot of new information in those standards. It's amazing how many standards we have referenced just in the IRC alone, but in all of the ICC codes. And all of these standards are going through a regular process. To update and to bring in new technology. It's amazing how much effort industry goes into providing certainly the latest and greatest in technology and criteria for the construction industry itself. Very, very interesting to go through and to see this. Okay, we are moving into the appendices. There's a couple that are certainly, I think, more applicable than others. Radon testing is one that certainly applies to those areas that are identified as having a radon hazard across the United States. There is actually a table that calls out by county which counties have those particular hazards. The requirements for the testing protocols that are used to identify if there is a radon hazard on the given project or not have been added to this particular appendix chapter. There is an exception that talks about an occupied space over an unenclosed open space, unoccupied space, is not having the need to have this kind of testing going on, because presumably, since it's open, you're getting a lot of ventilation, and the radon itself is being dispersed to the atmosphere. The problem that we have is that when the radar comes up through concrete slabs, or whatever type of area, maybe it's a raised floor that is not open, okay, that the radon can come into the house and have some health issues for the occupants. Nobody wants that, and that's why this appendix chapter is located in the residential code itself. And so previously, we didn't have a lot of the very detailed way to test for radon. It is now in the code itself. Okay, if you have one of these areas, believe it or not, in California, there's one county that's identified as having a radon hazard potential, and that's Ventura County. It's very surprising to me that it would be Ventura County. But anyhow, that is identified for us. And we can then, if the jurisdiction adopts this, or if certainly anybody wants to test for a radon potential on a given project, you have the testing protocol in this appendix chapter AF. I always said F, but whatever, that kind of thing. And we can use that then to move ahead. Some insurance interests are taking a look at this, along with lead, the lead-based paint potential for poisoning, and some are actually trying to get that test done when you have an identified area. So watch out for this. Know that it's in the back of the residential code. Cob construction. This is not corn cob construction. That's the first thing that always comes to mind. Cob is actually kind of like an adobe, if you will, clay type of technique. They're much smaller than like adobe blocks or bricks, that kind of a thing. It's very similar to straw bale or light straw construction, and it is a historic technique. There are groups out there, there's people out there that want to use some of these historic techniques. They're very interesting to see go up. I have not seen the cob. I have seen the straw bale construction. It is interesting to see them in use. I'm trying to make sure that I get out there and see how they're performing, 5-10 years after the construction too, just to see how they're doing. But if they're maintained well, they should do well. There is a group out there that is kind of taken on the responsibility of maintaining these historic practice kinds of framing chapters, appendix chapters. And they're based in, at least they were, in Arizona. But a lot of those techniques are being used in Colorado. Arizona is one. California out in the desert, we're seeing some of that. Actually, I saw straw bale up in one of the more, if you will, the higher elevation types of counties that's subject to snow. So it'll be interesting to see how that building continues to perform years out away from the actual original construction. But it's very interesting to have this, and there are a lot of people that are interested in trying to maintain and keep these historic techniques alive too. So that's what we have here. It is new to the residential code, the cob walls. Again, it just is funny how people seem to think that it's corn cob as opposed to a clay type of a product. This, I believe, is our last slide. Appendix AW. It's amazing how many appendix chapters there are. This is a new technique in the code. It's not as new out there, but it still is new to the construction environment. This is basically what's called additive manufacturing. We know what 3D printing is. You can actually buy a 3D printer yourself if you want to invest in that and build all kinds of projects yourself. But this is the larger scale types of projects where we're actually building residences using this. There are demonstration projects that are going on here in California. The city of Pleasanton, I know, had a proposal last year to have this kind of a development be built. I haven't been able to follow up on it, Fortunately, we know that the organization has to be highly experienced and certified. UL 3401 is the certification for those organizations that are going to do this kind of building using a 3D printing technique. And they need to work with the building official on this. Okay, it's called out in the code. We need to all understand how these buildings are going to go up and how they're going to be maintained, how they're going to perform, hopefully, moving on out in the future. The nice part about having that demonstration project in Pleasanton is UL actually has a good-sized office building with a lot of their technical staff very close to that particular city. Because this is a new type of technique for building buildings, there are a lot of special inspections that are required for this method. Okay, we need to make sure that the quality is going to be what we expect it to be. Now, granted, a lot of these projects are demonstration projects right now. I have yet to hear of anybody wanting to build other than maybe a small outbuilding, accessory building, that kind of a thing, with a 3D printing type of a technique. But I'd be willing to bet that we are going to see more requests to use 3D printing in the future. It's going to be expensive. It's just a fun new technique. And so we'll see how that goes. I would expect them to be more around some of our more densely populated areas, and may in fact actually work with the tiny home industry too. That's another area that may get involved with this. So it'll be interesting to see this moving forward, and if it does actually gain some traction out there in the built environment as a viable construction technique. Okay, that is the end of today's session. This is part 2 of the International Residential Code Significant Changes. You can see my email on this particular slide. Please feel free. I enjoy actually answering questions day or night, weekends or weekdays. It doesn't matter to me. It's really one of the things that I truly do enjoy. And if I don't know, we know people who probably do, and we can get you to who can have the answer for you, whatever question you may have. And with that, I think we'll open it up to questions. Thank you very much.